Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, and I'm Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have, of course, the weekly current Lancaster County virus statistics for where I live. Whoops, into the wrong stuff. Let's see. We will also have a good look at this week's Tyranny report. This may be an ongoing thing, the way things are looking. We will have reviews of Stargirl, Star Trek Lower Decks, Foundation, Dune, and What If. Although not too long on What If, because we don't like supporting the genocidal mouse with too much free publicity. We will also talk about the Babylon 5 reboot, and we will talk about what's in the Tales from SYL Ranch Darkroom this week, and anything else that you might want to talk about. This is, of course, a live stream, so you're free to talk with me about anything that you want in chat. You can ask me any question, whether it's political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without this thing being banned or risking it, the dystopian nightmare that is becoming the United States, or even things pertaining to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I am happy to answer each and every question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some personal areas that I won't discuss, but pretty much anything else is fair game. I will get to as many of my viewers as I possibly can. Not sure how long I can go today. I'll aim for 2 hours, maybe more, depends. I'm getting quite a lot better in my lower back. My regular viewers know that I have lower back arthritis, and I had a problem with my sciatic nerve a bit more than a month ago now, and it really kept me off my feet for a while. I may be able to go longer than 2 hours. I ain't promising nothing. So, hey, Marshall, let's see, I'm 5x5, cool. Let's see. As always, while we wait for some other people to trickle in, let me first do this. Great, I just belched at you. Wonderful. I love when you hit the right buttons at the right time. Yay. Yes, there's no Twitch stream, Marshall, and there's also not one over on YouTube, on Facebook. I'm getting any views over there on Twitch. The videos delete themselves automatically after a couple of 3 weeks, so I can't get views afterwards, so what's the point? What's the point? And over on Facebook, I'm not banned of doing it out of there anymore. It's just I wasn't getting any views. I get few views here, but at least some where I have my regular viewers, and I do get some views after the fact. One of the things in the Darkroom, by the way, is if it keeps going this way in the Darkroom, I'm in danger of having that thing being monetized. Weird. So yeah, say drop of truth, just YouTube. That's what we're doing for a while now. That's what I've been doing for a while. So while we wait for some more people to come in, we will answer the question that only one of my viewers actually asked, but it impacts me. What are the current Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics for where I live? As always, I source this with the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Health Department. Link in my description box below. I have the longest description boxes on YouTube. You got links to everything in sight. That one, it's one of those ones that I say go take a look at, even if you're not in Nebraska, because it's a well put together website. Lots of charts, lots of you can see exactly what's going on. It's very good. As always, some of my statistics are not quite the same as the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department, but that's because I'm using a more accurate count of the county's population. They are lowballing it so as to make the stats look better. Drop Juice is saying maybe I can use the Darkroom YouTube channel for my live streams. It's an advantage to do so. I'm trying to keep, kind of the subject matter separate. There's me gibbering on here, and over there it's just kind of, experimental stuff that people can watch and not get turned off by politics and things like that, Hey, Jeanette, how's life treating you tonight? So I updated the stats today at 18:30 UTC. The total the total Lancaster County population remains at roughly 324,216. Deaths are now up to 288, and that is up 5 from last week. That's not a good thing that 5 died, but it's a good thing from a statistical standpoint because we had a big spike and then it stopped to drop back down here. And where we are now is where we were several weeks before it just went to nothing. So there was nobody getting done there. We do have a mask order. It has been extended until the end of October. Interestingly, however, I'm seeing a lot of people who are not putting on masks if they can avoid it. Typically tends to happen in convenience stores, restaurants, fast food places, stuff like that. I always like to make this comparison. The number of people who died of heart disease in 2019 alone is 485, which means that over the course of the entire pandemic, the number of people who have died of the virus is slightly more than half the number of people who died of heart disease in 1 year alone in 2019. So I guess we have to say, if this virus is a pandemic in Lincoln, Nebraska, in Lancaster County, well, I guess we have to say that heart disease, frankly, is an ongoing health disaster. So, total Lancaster County confirmed cases is now up to 38,670, which is up 590 from last week. That may sound bad, but when you look at last week's statistics, this week is almost just about 1/3 of the number that was last week. Last week we had 3 times this number. So getting that down, good thing. We like that. Definitely a nice downward trend. The number of positive cases classified as recovered is at 32,035, which is up 333 from last week. Always good when that number goes up because it means more people are classified as recovered. But unfortunately, I don't really know what that classification means. I don't know if it means you recovered with side effects. Was it a full recovery? They don't break that sort of data down. They don't even break down whether you've got, Delta variants or Omega variants or going to kill you dead just by looking at your variants. They don't do that. So I don't know what this classification actually means. But given that there are only 288 deaths, if you do a little math, you find out that 6,000, sorry, my poor man's teleprompter is going away on me, 6,347 people exist in some sort of Schrodinger's cat-style limbo, where they exist both simultaneously alive and dead. It is, however, 252 more people now this week who are simultaneously alive and dead as opposed to last week. The total number of completed vaccinations is 189,924, which is up 1,284 from last week. This is pretty normal for us, 1,000 to 1,500 per week. We had a big spike of about 4,000 last week, but again, I think that was largely due to the propaganda. I would certainly like to think that my fellow Lincolnites have gotten wise to this whole charade. Most of the people I talk to have gotten wise to it. There are some Karens out there. I hope so. I just hope so. Cross my fingers. The percentage of our population that has been vaccinated. This one's weird. 58.579%, which is actually down. How do you get more numbers and go down? I don't know what happened with these numbers. Maybe I screwed up last week. I don't know. But it's very, very weird. Deaths as a percentage of confirmed cases is now at 0.745%, which is up 0.002% from last week. That rise is about statistically identical for months. Deaths as a percentage of population is at 0.0888%, which is up 0.0015% from last week. Statistically, these increases are exactly the same throughout the pandemic. Given our other stats, and if you look at the website for this, you're going to see it, personally, but given our other stats and rates of increase and when we had spikes versus when the vaccines were available, you just had to say these vaccines have not had the slightest impact whatsoever unless there are some side effects or deaths as a result, which Lincoln Lancaster County ain't going to track because that don't go along with their nice propaganda campaign. Oh, let's see. Drop 2 says, it's supposed to be spring here in Australia, but still cold as winter. Weird. Couldn't tell you about that. Around where I live, We don't consider any weather weird. It's so much of it. Marshall says influx of population or adoption of new census data for the area by the county. That's possible. I'll take a look. The 2020 census numbers ought to be out there someplace now. Drop Truth says, I had a strange indirect discussion with my employer this week. It was suggested strongly that if I wanted to go there, continue there, I must get a jab. Well, that sucks. I'm just waiting for them to say, if you're on SSDI like I am, you have to get vaxxed if you're going to keep getting payments. I'm just waiting for it. You just know they're going to do it because they're scum, they're vermin. Speaking of which, let's talk about this week in Tyranny. Because, we are really going close there. We have, oh God, we've got so many things going on. Incompetent president. We have a New York mayor who fired 70,000 nurses for no reason other than they were not vaccinated. This is stupid. Up to this point, right, all the way through the pandemic, up to yesterday, I think it was, all the way through that, these people had not been vaccinated. All the way through that. And then all of a sudden it becomes necessary to vaccinate because, if you don't, you're going to kill people. We don't want nurses killing people. So a lot of them just said, okay, so long. I certainly hope that all of you pack your bags and get the hell out of New York. They don't want you there. Find somewhere else. Healthcare is a big field. You will be able to find lots of places that don't require you in healthcare to vaccinate or do anything that you don't want to do against your will. I would certainly suggest, hey, try Nebraska. Come to Omaha, 1 million people. Come to Lincoln, 324,000 people. I would bet that there is a job there for you. And you know what else, if you're from New York? You're going to discover that with $250,000, you can buy a damned mansion here. You can buy a brand new 3-bedroom home for under $200,000 if you want to buy one that's older. It just drops and drops and drops. There really isn't. It's just your money will go way farther here. And so whatever you earn is going to go a lot farther. Gasoline is a lot cheaper. We don't have quite the same level of taxation, although certainly they try. So flee where they don't want you, and let it go to hell, because that's really about the only thing that can happen. So they're going to bring in National Guard troops. Does the National Guard actually have that many nurses or trained medics? I mean, really? Are there, I don't know, about the New York National Guard. When I think about the Nebraska National Guard, I think it'd be hard-pressed to say there's that many. But who knows? Maybe they've got enough. Maybe they're qualified, and maybe they're not. Maybe they just did this out of nothing but propaganda and to spite, because they hate and detest people who will not vaccinate. Hate them. Want them to die. I've been wished deaths so many times by people who find out that I'm not vaccinated, and they go, oh, hope you die. They want you dead. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. It doesn't make any sense to me. The thing that's obvious you can say is, hey, wait a minute. If it's really a pandemic, can you really afford to fire all those medical personnel? Guys, leave New York City. Do not look over your shoulder. All I ask is that you don't bring the politics that failed there to my state. Okay? Just, when you get here, kind of assimilate. Right? Find out what it is that we like and why we like it, and assimilate into it instead of saying, oh, okay, it has to be like what I left behind because what you left behind sucked. Same thing for people in Los Angeles. If you guys coming out here, that's fine with us. Just don't bring your frickin' politics with you, because your politics are what caused the disasters that you are now fleeing. Come here, find out what's important to us, and assimilate. Do not just say, oh, these people are freaking voting for Trump all the time, and they're voting Republican, they're idiots. We have to change them with our politics. No, you don't. No, you don't. Just leave your politics at the border, please. Let's see. I got a bunch of people who want him here. Drop Truth says, I had a strange indirect discussion with my employer. Oh, you were saying, I'm sorry, I caught that before. At least we have AstraZeneca, which isn't an mRNA Pfizer jab. I don't know. I ain't going to take it, and I don't have to. There's only one circumstance under which I would take it, and it's unlikely that circumstance is ever going to happen. Marshall says, replaced by National Guard doctors and nurses from the state's National Guard, which means that docs and nurses from other places are relocated from the homes to wherever. Megamind level thinking. Yes, it's so stupid. It's so stupid of them. And I don't know the New York State Constitution. Maybe this schmuck out there has the ability to do it under the New York Constitution. I don't know. It's certainly not a federal issue. I know that for certain. It is not a federal issue, so if they fire you, don't go to the feds. It's not a federal issue. It's a state issue. So go look at your state constitution and see if they have the ability to do it. Not that it freaking matters. They're going to do it anyway, whether you want to or not, because they are all power-mad, sociopathic narcissists. Jeanette says, hi to everybody listening while driving home. Oh, cool. People are listening to you driving home. Awesome. Drop 2 says, your parents are in Australia have had the AstraZeneca with no side effects. That's good. Daughter in Brazil had the same Indian Kovac, that one, which is a traditional inoculation. Cool. The Guard has quite a robust medical division. Okay, take your word for it, Marshall. I don't know anything about it. I just look at the sheer number of people that they let go, or I'm sorry, pitched out on their ears. By the way, if you're married to somebody who just got kicked out because they have principles, you should be wrapping your arms around them and hugging and kissing them and saying, thank God I have somebody who has integrity, because that's what this was. Saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Fine, fire me. I don't care. I'm still not going to do it. That's some serious integrity and definitely deserves to be recognized. Jeanette says, with the flag stating you're besieged before and you just didn't notice. Yeah, my, the upside down flag is to indicate severe distress. And I believe that our republic is in severe distress at this time. So, yeah, that's why I have the upside-down flag on my green screen. It'll be a little different next week. What you don't know there is that behind there's a black space. There's a black square hole. That black square hole is actually where in this cabin we would put up a fan to blow the hot air from that's coming off of this big family heirloom here into the next rooms. But it was out when I took the picture and didn't realize it till later. Next week over here, you're going to see this flag probably scaled down and looking like it's actually on the wall instead of just sort of floating there in space. But I ran significantly out of time when I was getting ready for this show here. In point of fact, I have very little that's scripted. I have a lot of notes, and that's about all. So, what else? I found this funny as hell because I knew it. I knew that this happens. And I wasn't surprised. I knew this goes on. As I always say, there is, whenever you're dealing with anybody on YouTube, and certainly with me, there is a level of theatricality. Now, I'm not acting. I'm saying things that I wrote or that I think. And sometimes, as you can occasionally see, the spirit moves me and I get angry, but generally not. But I do have some theatricality. I mean, this is a costume. This is a green screen. I'm not actually in this room. I wish I were. But I'm not. I'm not in this room, and I have, the cam. I have lights at 45-degree angles. I have a key light up there. I have my camera actually at an angle. It looks like it's straight towards me, but it's an angle because if you were looking straight it would be like this. That is theatricality because it makes me look thinner. For the camera to be up here looking down towards my head as opposed to catching, everything. A lot of women on YouTube do the same thing, only typically they will put on something low cut and aim the camera even higher than that on purpose. You will see it all the time. Drop True says, curious theory has been proposed here in Australia that the armed police, Kevlar helmets, masks, may not be Australian, but overseas forces brought it under UN mandate. Can't tell me either way. Any of the footage I've seen of it, I mean, I don't know much better, but it sounds like Australian accents whenever I've heard cops talk. I don't know exactly what's going on over there. I'm always hesitant to talk about foreign nations because I'm not there. But everything we keep seeing on social media and the videos that pop up, jeez, it looks like you guys went straight to tyranny a hell of a lot faster than we did. So anyway, there is always a level of theatricality. There always is. You can't get away from it. If you're going to look good, there's some level of theatricality. Same thing. My voice, I warm up my voice as much as possible before the show. I'm using what isn't really my own accent. It's close. It's a general American accent that doesn't actually exist. Nobody speaks this, except news reporters, stuff like that. And you'll hear me occasionally drop into my native Nebraska accent. So there's theatricality involved. And I'm totally cool about that. Drop of truth. Do I dust my forehead with talc to reduce the glare? No, but that's not a bad idea, to be perfectly honest. I don't know. I've gotten away with not having to use any kind of makeup. As I get older, that may change. But Marshall says UN troops are required by treaty to be uniquely identifiable, usually by blue berets. Yes. Drop 2 says only the people in charge speak. The average thug cop doesn't speak at all. Again, I can't tell you what's going on over there. All I can look at is, them beating the crap out of people, and for what looked like frivolous violations, you walked outside and they just tackled you, and God, wouldn't want to be in one of your big cities right now. At least that's what it looks like from over on the other side of an entire gigantic ocean that puts you even in a different day than me. I can't say for certain. I just look at the stuff that I'm seeing and go, geez. Jeanette says, I can't tell the difference between your accents. Never noticed. A Nebraska accent, this sort of upper Great Plains accent, is very, very similar to a general American accent. The difference tends to be in some diphthongs and how we tend to clip off the ends of some words. It really kind of depends. Once I've started doing it, because I don't speak this way all the time, but once I've started doing it, I can't get out of it very easily to explain what the difference is. But there is a minor difference. If somebody from Nebraska, and in fact there was somebody who worked as a journalist in Omaha, they went to CNN. They didn't change anything. As I say, almost all reporters do this, even local ones in places like the Deep South where they have, significant Southern accents. They'll clean it up quite a lot, for use on television. Anyhow, so there is theatricality involved in this. There's theatricality involved in anything. But there was one bit of theatricality that I found just funny as hell when the pictures came out. So let me show you a pic here of good old President Biden getting ready for his booster shot that he had not too long ago, a couple of days ago, I guess. And you'll notice, geez, now I'm voices. Hang on. And you'll notice, it looks like the interior of someplace in the White House, looking out on some kind of lawn. I mean, and part of it, you can see what looks like buildings and trees and all of that stuff. But then another picture came out that was very edifying. This one. It's a set. The whole thing is a set. And not even the windows. They're not pointing to anything. It's the interior of a building. This is a set. And they're not telling you like I am. I'll happily tell you where my theatrics come in. But they're not telling you. They're pretending that this is the same thing as that other set. And you want to know what's really interesting? If you look off to the right there, you can see that podium with the presidential seal on it and the microphones and then the U.S. flag behind it. That is the spot at which they actually, Biden and President and stuff, actually do speeches. So when they've got the cameras pointed straight at them, well, where they actually have the cameras pointed is about where those people in the audience are on the left. That was an amazing bit to me. I was thrilled when I saw that because I was relatively certain there was a fair amount of theatricality involved in this. And bingo, there it is. It's all theatrics. Oh, man. Dropper 2 says, very telling video, had an armed cop tell the podcaster that he had to do the job. His wife had lost her job to the lockdowns. He was just following orders. Germany 1933, USSR 1917, anyone. Worldwide 2020, 2021. By the way, Jeanette, there's a good example. The way I pronounce 2021, as opposed to my natural accent, which would be more like 20 and 21. So it's 20. You get an eh in there where the eh is in 20. But anyway, I got a huge kick out of that. That fact that little bit of theatricality was inadvertently leaked, and we now know for an absolute fact that everything outside of those windows is fake. Those walls are fake. I've seen a wider shot. It's only two walls, right? There's where this camera is at is where another wall would be. It's only a two-wall set, for God's sake. And those press sitting down there on the right, would they ever tell you about this little bit of theatricality? Never in a million years. Never in a million years. It is a kind of propaganda, and they go right along with it. They don't tell you that stuff. So I love when that stuff shows up. Jeanette, you hear the difference. Good. Yeah, as I say, I will often drop back, but that's a good example. 20. There's other words that come to mind, but as I say, it's very, very close to a Upper Great Plains sort of Midwestern accent. Get a little north of here, then you get some odd diphthongs. Minnesota is really interesting. I worked a summer in Minnesota, and the Minnesota dialect doesn't have some of the diphthongs that my regular one does, or General American. A diphthong is where you take two different sounds. I studied linguistics, because about the only thing I was ever good at back when I was an actor a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away was dialects. So one of my cousins, I'll never forget, I said to him, because I hadn't seen him for years, and there's a guy he used to hang out with named Gordy from way back when, and I said, so I've seen Gordy lately? And he says, I haven't seen Gordy for a hell of a long time. It's just it doesn't have the same diphthongs, and that, isn't unusual, but the diphthongs aren't there. So where I might say so, they would say so. It's so is O is actually the sound that's being made, so, as opposed to so, which is not the diphthong. It's O as opposed to O. So stuff like that. There goes your moon landing hoax defense. Well, I think the moon landing hoax thing is pretty well dispelled by nothing more than just the shadows. They don't come from a central light source. They come from one that's very, very far away. Yeah, because they all have the same shadows pointing in the same direction. So, yeah, we got that bit of lunacy from the White House, which, certainly wasn't the only lunacy from the White House. Among other things that went down, the Federal Reserve has killed fractional reserve banking. Now, if you don't know, fractional reserve banking says that if you have $1,000 and you put it into a bank, they can take all but, I don't know what the percentage is, but let's just say all but 10%. They could take $900 out, and they can start using that for other investments and make some money. Well, what they've done now is unfortunately engineered things in such a way that fractional reserve banking is about over. I am trying to figure out what to do about this. I'm unclear that it makes any damn sense to keep my money in a bank. One of the things it's going to do is cause interest-bearing accounts to stop being interest-bearing. And the interesting thing about that is, even if you look at the interest that you get for a checking account or a savings account, if they are interest-bearing, is less than the inflation rate. So if it's less than the inflation rate, you're actually kind of losing money. Ridiculous. Diphthong is a combination of vowel sounds. That's exactly right, Drop of Truth. A few second reviews on No Time to Die. Haven't seen that. It's very watchable. It's the longest 007 film ever. Oh, great. I haven't watched that one. I'll probably get around to it, but I had 5 reviews going this week. And one of them was Dune, which I don't think opens until next month. But I was able to obtain a screener, so I watched Dune, so I can talk about that tonight. Marshall says 0.1% or less interest rate. Yeah, and the inflation rate is considerably higher than that. And if they're going to screw up banking the way that they're doing it, maybe it makes more sense to have my SSID check put in that account, pay my bills off of it, and then pull it out and put it in my freaking mattress or something. They really screwed that up. The people in power have no idea what the impact of their stupid policies are. They just haven't a clue. These are the people that are supposed to know what's supposed to happen. Like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or Red Cortez on this show because it fits. But she's got some kind of degree in economics. She doesn't have a freaking clue about economics. I don't think a single Democrat has a clue about economics, and I think the vast majority of Republicans don't have a clue about economics. They don't have any idea what policies they're making is going to really screw things up for people, and this is one of them. You can get 8% or so on USDC using DeFi. Again, what's the point of a bank? What's the point of a bank other than the FDIC, which wouldn't work anyway? If you had any significant problem with your banking system, the FDIC doesn't have enough money to pay for it. Not that it matters. They just throw it onto that giant pile that's the public debt that can never be repaid. So. Economics, home economics maybe. Oh, I bet not. I'm not sure they've been teaching that sort of mathematics since I was in high school. Now, I don't remember exactly what they called it. I think they called it civics class. But among other things, they would teach you things like how to balance your checkbook, how to make sure you're not getting ripped off for this, that, or the other thing in that civics class, which was the last one I took. It was something they gave you right on the way out, last semester of high school. They made you take that. But they don't do that anymore, which was interesting. Just as a side note, I came up about, I graduated 10 years after the end of the Vietnam War. And of course, that was a really unpopular war. And so people were, there was a debate between myself and another girl who, I understood her perspective. But what the deal was is, why didn't we drop nukes on Vietnam? It would have probably won the war, right? My thinking was, well, probably they did have plans for that. They made up plans and passed it off to the civilian leadership, the president, and he looked at it and he said, There is no way that I'm going to get away with dropping nukes on any country right now, so we're not going to do that. But the girl who there was a girl who got very offended by this notion. How could you even plan such a thing? Well, you plan for anything. And then when something comes up, you hand it off to superiors or the president, hopefully anyway, a civilian leadership, and they decide, politically whether it's the right thing to do or whether it makes sense, in the geopolitics. But you always plan for stuff. Even if you don't do it, you always plan. And of course, she was like, how could you ever think about using nukes? And I'm like, well, that's not the point. The point is you plan, hand it off to somebody else, and see if that's what they want to do. There's always plans, always plans. Drop 2 says Apple TV's Foundation looks beautiful, but is gender swapped, rather dull. I'm going to talk about Foundation as well, the first 2 episodes of that. Jim Marshall says home ec was that's what it was called in 1978. For us, home ec involved lots of cooking. You could take, it was in junior high school, what's middle school now. You could either take shop or you could take home ec. All the girls tended to take home ec. The guys tended to take shop, except for people like me, big old weirdo geeks who don't really want to mess with any of the shop equipment. So I took, I was one of the few guys in home economics. I didn't do me a lick of good. At the time, I could make a few things and eat them. Didn't do me a lick of good. Give me a microwave oven and I'm set. Drop of truth, Democrat economics. Let's spend our way out of debt. The Republicans do exactly the same thing. It's why I'm not one of those people who wants to bow down and at the altar of what Rush Limbaugh used to call Ronaldus Maximus, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan ran up the public debt more than any president to that point, and he set the standard for all remaining Republican presidents, which was, as long as you talk about lowering it, you can raise it as high as you want. And there has never been a Republican president who didn't skyrocket it. In fact, there are some times when you can say Republicans did worse than the Democrats in terms of skyrocketing debts. They all do it. The only way to fund these crazy crap that they always have going on is through deficit spending. Billions and trillions of dollars of deficit spending. Right now, I don't think you could calculate what the U.S. public debt is. If you include things like unfunded mandates, it's probably $150 trillion, which is more money than exists in the entire world by far. Let's see. Drop 2 says, when I did home economics when you were 15, you got the highest results from a year. Awesome. Your mom told me many of her secret techniques. I didn't get any of that. The things I remember about my home ec were I figured out how to make a pizza more or less from scratch. I was like, wow, I made a pizza. I couldn't tell you how to do it today. I have to nuke everything. Not that it matters. I can only eat about 5 things anyway because of the diabetes. But, Jeanette says, you took shop. Awesome. No problem with that. I don't remember if any girls took shop when I was there. I just remember like me and one other guy were the ones that took home ec. I remember that. Robert Dixon, nice to see you here tonight. A mid-90s middle school kid. Yeah, you had to do all of it, home ec, shop, etc. Wow, I didn't know that. As I say, with us, it was a choice. The two classes occurred at the same time, and because of the era that I came out of, which was, women really just starting to become equal in the workforce, the expectation still was that a lot of women would go on to be homemakers, and so that would be useful skills for them, while a lot of the men might go on to be in manufacturing, and so shop skills would be useful for them. In reality, of course, all of our manufacturing went overseas, so it didn't matter beyond a certain point. But it's kind of like Tim Allen used to say, well, got to get it more power. More power. More power. Drop of Truth says, will the USA suffer hyperinflation it did post-World War I Germany? I expected it to happen a long time ago, to be perfectly honest. The point at which it became to me just glaringly obvious that we could never pay off this debt. It's impossible. We can't even come close. And all we've ever done since longer than I've been alive is throw more money on that pile that is in the tens to hundreds of trillions now. I always say there is no civilization in history, there is no nation, no civilization in history that has indebted itself the way the U.S. has. In fact, if you take all of the debt from every country and every civilization going back to the dawn of written history, you will find that we owe more. So this is something that can be never paid off. It's seen, and every single time, eventually people tumbled to it, that, hey, wait a minute, this is never going to get paid off. And yeah, then you do get hyperinflation. You get a currency collapse followed by a government collapse. I am unclear why it hasn't happened yet. I guess my father used to say that when you get into the numbers, billions even, it becomes imaginary numbers. Now, I don't mean that the numbers don't exist. I mean that they're numbers that are so large that no human being can imagine them. I mean, I can't imagine what $150 trillion would look like. I mean, even if you gave it to me in gold blocks, a meter on a side, I mean, it would be a gigantic structure. I literally cannot imagine what that amount of money is. It is imaginary. So I think what's happened is people have just sort of said worldwide, okay, that's a number I can't deal with. I guess the U.S. is good for it. And here in the U.S., of course, a lot of people graduating high school don't know the difference between millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions, etc. They don't know what those numbers are. So for them, it's easy to get it past them. Drop of Truth says, we got to do woodworking, metalwork, architectural drafting with options to do graphics and photography. We had a well-fitted school. Cool. Let's see. You enjoyed all of those subjects. Yeah, my thing bumped up there, so I didn't see it. Interestingly enough, the only real shop-type work that I did, I got a job back when I was an actor a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I got a job as a stagehand. And I did a fair amount of stuff then, and I was young and stupid, so they always would send me, 100 feet up into the rafters to climb around on things because I was too dumb to say no. But I did a fair amount of stuff there with tools and things, but it wasn't something I did except I was getting paid for it. So Marshall says, at this point, hyperinflation is the most likely outcome in terms of finance. You'd say 95% plus confidence. I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. There's certainly no nation in history that would cover even a fraction of the United States debt that did not experience a currency collapse followed by a government collapse. Drop 2 says, Janet Yellen mentioned a week or so ago that the Federal Reserve may have to forgo on its debit. It's October this year. If that happens to collapse the global economy. I am no longer in a position where I'm going to necessarily predict anything in particular. I really thought that this would have come to head quite a long time ago, but it never has. So I don't know how much longer it can go on like this. As I say, we're dealing with numbers that are so large that they are unimaginable. They are imaginary numbers. You cannot deal with them. They're just too big. They're not something you can think of. And it's like trying to describe the distance between here and Alpha Centauri. Okay, it's 4.5 light years. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if you flew at the speed of light, you'd be there in 4.5 years. Well, the distance is actually monumental and impossible, really, for the average person to conceive of because it's so large. Marshall says 2.7 billion Bitcoin. That's $150 trillion. Well, what's his name that hasn't cashed in? Maybe we can get him to cash in and pay off our debt. So, going on to a couple of other things. The Arizona election audit. Oh my God. Always say, I cannot prove anything. I was not there. I have never had hands on the machines. I don't know what procedures they are going about to discern this, that, or the other thing. I would need to actually have these in my hands to be able to do it. But these guys, as an IT security guy, I just want to bang my head against the wall. In terms of all the mistakes that they made, it would be hard for me to describe them all, frankly, to a neophyte, and I don't mean to sound like an a-hole like that, but this is something I spent most of my career doing. If you'd brought me those things, if you just brought me one of them, I would have run a pen test, a penetration test against it, and it would have failed miserably. It's astonishing how bad it was. Now, I can't say for certain that the possible avenues of attack on this were actually exploited. I don't know that for certain. I can't say it for me personally. However, it seems to me highly likely, given just how bad those things are. I mean, the degree to which they would have failed a pen test is astonishing. You know, you have administrative access to non-administrative users or people who shouldn't have administrative access. Just down the line, every single fracking thing that they could have done wrong, they did. And apparently they never ran it past somebody who knows how to do a penetration test, or they just didn't care. And it's impossible to tell which. I don't think it's going to change anything. It's not going to alter the outcome of any elections. But God, what a nightmare. What an absolute nightmare. You know, guys, if you're going to do these things, before you roll them out, take them from the manufacturer, walk them over to somebody like me, and have me do a pen test on them. So I can tell you, okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 things you need to fix before these can go into production. See, when you're working in IT like I did for about 40 years, when you're doing penetration testing, it's like this, right? And I've had this happen a million times. It's just normal, and you kind of expect it. You set up like a new server for something, right? A new web server. And the last thing you do before you put it, even remotely think about putting it into production, is hand it off to a security guy, someone unrelated to what you've been doing, unrelated to the programming, unrelated to the administration side. Purely out of all that loop, who doesn't have any kind of a foot in that game, doesn't have anything to do with it. And you say, do a pen test against this thing. And if everybody's done their job right, it should come back with very few vulnerabilities, or vulnerabilities that have to be there in order for the thing to function correctly. And you look at everything it's talking to and go, okay. But that's about the last thing that happens before you put one of those things out the door. You run a penetration test against it. No pen testing against this whatsoever, you know. And oftentimes when you run a pen test, right, you'll find that there are some things in there that you accidentally left in, or accidentally misconfigured, or accidentally wrote wrong in the code. And the security guy says, no, we cannot have this in production with this kind of flaw. Go back and fix it. That's not unusual. It's not unusual. And your average sysadmin and your average programmer don't think twice about it. You know, we know it happens. We know that can happen. If you send it back to us, it's not like telling us we're not doing our jobs right. In this case, it would have failed a pen test so miserably that you would say they're not doing their jobs right. It was amazing. Let's see, back to Marshall saying Satoshi only has about 1 million Bitcoin. Oh, I didn't know that. Drop of Truth says the largest holders of Bitcoin are the intelligence agencies. Maybe. I don't know. Marshall says, and Marshall's also in IT, and he is about the same length of time, a little bit more than I have, in fact, probably at least 10 years, but longer than I've been. Marshall says, very easy to exploit those systems. Yes, one user password pair that was known by everyone. Yes. Open RDP ports. RDP is a remote desktop protocol. That's what that stands for. You should never have that open. Duh! The whole concept as a security guy, you had RDP on? Are you insane? RDP is what happens if you're calling tech support and they don't even use it anymore. If you're calling tech support, they'll usually point you to a website that you go to, and then they'll be able to mirror your screen and get into it. But RDP is not really used except workstations in large enough environments so that you have, because there's a lot of different administration software that you can use. So if you got 1,000 desktop PCs and you're on the help desk that day, God forbid, and so you have to get into other people's machines, you may sort of work your way around to RDP, but you should never have had that open on a freaking voting machine. It boggles my mind. It's like the first thing you turn off. If you hand it over to me as a sysadmin, I'm like, okay, turn off RDP, turn off anything that's going to be remotely resembling a remote access protocol, turn it all off. No. And they did have, as Marshall says, one username and password that had had administrative rights. That means it could do anything to that machine that it wanted to. Anybody who had access to it could have done anything. For the most part, I don't think your average government flunky knows enough. Clearly, the fact that it never occurred to them to shut off some of this stuff or make the security better, the fact that it never occurred to them tells me that probably they are relatively incompetent, which doesn't surprise me when you get to government workers. But damn, that was really, really, really dumb on so many levels. Marshall's saying all it would take is one Raspberry Pi plugged into the network and poof. I'm trying to see if I can find my second Raspberry Pi just so that the average person can see what we're talking about. God. I have so many things on my desk and I don't know where my other Pi went. Well, a Raspberry Pi is a computer that is if it's in the box, in the case, is about this big by this thick, It's kind of a squarish thing. It's what they call a single board computer. Tends to be the same processor that's used in your phones. I mean, it would have been so easy. It would have been so easy to plug those things in. And the monumental, the galactic stupidity involved there is just amazing to me. Hey, it didn't burp at you that time. Marshall says, and a smart move would be create a new wireless access point on the Pi, then sit down in your car and do whatever you wanted to the systems. Yes. Anybody that knows enough. There's a Black Hat conference, I think, in Vegas every year, where they point out things that they found that were vulnerable. Any of those guys, hell, if I put my mind to it, if I know... now that I know how vulnerable they are, I could do it if I wanted to. It's just that freaking vulnerable. It's amazing. Drop 2 says, engineered that way, all software has backdoors. No, they don't. No. Backdoors tend to be accidental, as he says. Maybe not in this case, but in general. Yeah, backdoors were common until... I guess sometime in the 1990s-ish, it was more common for a programmer to put in a backdoor. It's best described if you watch the movie War Games. A backdoor at that time in the 1980s, when this wasn't a big deal, nobody knew what this stuff was aside from some specialists. It would be some kind of username and password that would allow you to get in and have your administrative access, regardless of what other security they may have added after you left. But we pretty well got rid of those. It's in fact part of the things that penetration testing will do, is try to find things like backdoors. Will it respond to certain usernames and passwords, stuff like that? We don't like them. We don't like them at all. Squashed them out of existence as much as humanly possible. Drop 2 says, how do you get back into the software? Modify. Front door, yes, through the security system, yes. The way that you get into any of those things, I mean, from my perspective as a systems admin, right? I was a sysadmin more than anything else throughout my career. Okay, get a bare machine, bare computer, right? And I want to, one of my last jobs where I thought they were doing it right. What we did was we would install, I don't even know how to describe this. It's Microsoft Active Directory. It is a way that allows you to use the same username and passwords over a number of different computers. It will allow you to set what those people have access to and what they don't have access to. So you just go in the front door and you elevate your privileges if you need to, right? Let's see. Yeah, the front door is where you tend to go in because that's the way it is. Now, if you're somebody like me, or Marshall for that matter, but it happened to me several times. It's really fun if you look at my resume. There's only 2 places on there that are still in existence. They all went out of business while I was there. I don't think I happened to, I had anything to do with it, but they did. But if you got let go from someplace in a position like mine, oh man, that triggers an instantaneous process of going out and finding anywhere that I might even conceivably have access to and shutting it off so that I can't get in remotely. If I was sitting on site in a data center, I wouldn't be able to get in. It's really horrifying. I've had to do it a couple of times. It's like, oh God, no. Oh no, one of the sysadmins, okay, I'm going to be spending the rest of the day until about 9 o'clock taking off this person's, all of this person's access. Press's password was @SSWRD. Yeah, never underestimate the sheer stupidity of those in politics. Yeah, well, it's not just in politics. I worked in the private sector. You'd be amazed. One of the fun things is because you can enforce password requirements. X number of uppercase, lowercase numbers, special characters, things like that. You can enforce a policy where it must conform to it to some extent, and that will help. But then you'll get somebody because it'll turn into weird passwords, and so they'll write down their username and their password and sticky tape it to their computer. Saw that all the time. Marshall says, yes, Joshua. That was the one that was in War Games. That's another thing, by the way. It only had one word. Usually you have a username and a password, not just one single word. And then that's been the case since forever. I don't know. Drop 2 says, very biblical. How quaint. Yes. Yes, I get the reference. It comes from the movie War Games. War Games is a fun movie. It was relatively accurate for its time. It was one of the few movies that, as somebody who knew something about computers, I could look at and go, okay, that kind of makes sense. And actually, it spawned a program. If you watch that movie, I've forgotten the Matthew Broderick's character's name, but he plugs his computer into a phone line and has it start dialing phone numbers, looking for computers on the other ends, right? That sort of dialer, that auto dialer for PCs, did not exist prior to that film. It caused somebody to go, wow, that is a damn good idea. And they created what's called a War Games auto dialer to do exactly that. Used to do it myself. Find computers by running my auto dialer on 1,000 phone numbers simultaneously. Drop 2 says Joshua in Hebrew sends the vowels is the same as Yeshua. Yes, Jesus. That may have been intentional on their part, given the rest of the film. I don't know. Drop 2 says Matthew Broderick's best film. Well, I like what's that Civil War one he did? But I like that one. But aside from that, yeah, I think you're probably right. As young as he was when he made it, it is probably his best film, in my opinion. Alex Brightman, yeah, I think it may have been Lightman. I'm not sure either. It's been so long since I watched it. I'll go out to YouTube and find somebody who's reacting to it, because they have sometimes. Because I've seen that movie about 1 million times. It's surprising to me that I don't remember some of these names. So we had that. We had that stuff being found on those machines. If it were up to me, I would hold new elections with nothing but Scantron cards. You know, those are the ones you use a pencil to mark a little dot. That's the highest technology you should ever use with a vote. There are ways that you could secure voting using higher technology. But these are government flunkies we're talking about. These are government flunkies who actually did not run a penetration test against a voting machine that was fantastically vulnerable to attack. So for me, I would just have new elections. But that's not going to happen for political reasons. You can't be overturning the 2020 election, even if it's fair, because the other half of the country would go nuts. They would go berserk. They already hate half of their countrymen with a level of hatred that I cannot understand, a deep-seated level of hatred that makes them believe that anybody, for example, who's not taking the vaccine must be someone on the right, and they feel that the right deserves to die. So they will say, well, I hope you die for not taking that vaccine. They really hate them. If the election results were overturned for 2020, I assume we'd have a shooting civil war over that. It's politically, it's too late. It's too late. They should have had Scantron cards. That's about all. Scantron cards. Marcia says, IMDb says David Lightman was the character. That's right, David Lightman. More biblical references, Drop 2 says. Well, I mean, you're dealing with, a film that does deal with the end of the world almost. So, that may have been intentional. I don't know. Okay, so that's all fracked up. And again, as somebody who is a security guy, I can't say for certain that these things were exploited. I can say for certain that I could have exploited them. People with my level of knowledge could have exploited them. I think whenever you've got something that is that insecure, you kind of have to almost assume that they're being exploited. I mean, if you're a security guy, right? One thing about security people is it's nice if you're a little bit paranoid. You're constantly thinking, what is the worst freaking thing that can happen, and how do I guard against it? What is the least worst thing that can happen, and how do I need to spend my time guarding against it now, or can I let it wait and do this other thing first? But you're constantly thinking in terms of what can somebody do? What horrible thing can somebody do? What horrible thing can somebody do so I can get in there and fix it so they can't do it that way? What is something awful that could be done? Marshall says the Electoral College has voted. Yes, there's no constitutional remedy for overturning it at all. It's done. We're stuck. And honestly, had you been in charge of the IT for that election, people would have been immediately fired for incompetence. Yes. Problem is, I don't know that they know who's incompetent. I mean, that's the thing about, I hate coming down on government workers, but IT workers out of government that I've ever dealt with, twits. I can say that it's a little different when you get into things like defense, DOD stuff. My brother-in-law, for a number of years, worked inside Cheyenne Mountain. He couldn't tell me anything about it. Don't get me wrong. He couldn't tell me anything about it. It was all top secret. But the level of security that they had was just amazing. If he made the wrong phone calls from the wrong phones, all of his access would be shut down. and he would have to go through a security audit to get him back up. So I think that's a little bit different when you get to, war and defense. They're usually better at it. But say if you're just working for the state of Nebraska, I'd lay odds that you're one of the least talented people out there, because state, federal jobs don't pay as much as the private sector. You can make a lot more money in the private sector. So if you are capable of making more money in the private sector, why on God's earth would you ever go to the government and work for them for quite a lot less? So what happens is the good people go into the private sector, and the ones that suck tend to go into the government sector. That's been the case every time I've had to deal with them. I just want to smack my head and then slap them across the face from time to time. And they tend to be slow. There's a great line in Ghostbusters: I've worked in the private sector. They expect results. Yeah. I've had these guys just, barely get by doing as little work as possible while I'm standing there bashing my head against the wall. It's like, when is this going to get done? Because I need to do something that's dependent on that. So they tend to suck. Drop Truth says, those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the vote decide everything. Joseph Stalin. We're certainly getting to a point like that. And to segue into my next little topic, it's probably about to get worse. If anybody who's paying attention knows, we have an enormous number of people coming across our southern border. I don't know that anybody is even counting them anymore. They're just walking across, being picked up, taken into the country, not really deported. A few of them are sent back, but most of them are just allowed to come into the country, as they always have been, with basically a piece of paper that says, show up in court at this date and this time. And they go, yep, we'll show up in court. And then poof, they disappear. And our voter rolls and our election systems are clearly very, very insecure. I am morally certain that because it's looked at as, the Democrats let us in, I am morally certain a lot of them are going to vote illegally. And guess who they're going to vote for? They're going to vote for a Democrat because they let them in. This is bad. This is very bad. I tried to alert my own senator to it. He wouldn't take a meeting with me. These guys are too dumb, apparently, to know the trap that they've gotten into. There's so many people, you could almost refer to it as an invasion, because it's tens of thousands, just coming across every freaking day. Hundreds of thousands a month. It's astonishing how many of them are coming in. Let's see. Marshall says, the guy in charge of your county's IT thinks Java is an operating system and Linux is a toy OS not worthy of any consideration at all. Came from school that way, I guess. If you don't know, Linux is an operating system, and it has completely taken over the internet. There's a good chance that, everything that Google does, in fact, I know it, everything Google does is with its own slightly altered version of Linux. It has taken over the data center. Apparently, this guy's a complete idiot. And Java is not an operating system. It is a programming language. Totally different thing. Marshall says he also thinks that any IP address that starts with 10 is inherently insecure. Hard to explain this. Okay, there are some IP addresses that are what we call non-routable. Any IP address that starts with 10 is not routable. That means you can use it inside of your own network to your heart's content, and we did all the time. 10 networks, 192, 168, 172 networks. These are all networks that are not routable on the internet. If you try to get out to the internet with them, just won't send the packets. It'll do it all fine inside of your own network, and we use them inside of our own networks all the time. But it will not route out to the internet. You have to do some other stuff on a firewall for that to happen. But it doesn't route. That's the only thing about an IP address that starts with a 10 is that you can use it internally but not externally. If you're an ISP and you start using 10s on your routers, you're in serious trouble. But for your average desktop user in the average office, there's some good chance that you might have an IP address that starts with 10. It's not inherently insecure. It just doesn't route. That's all. Yes, Drop Truth, 15,000 people from Haiti under those Texan bridges. Yes, some of them were sent back, but most of them were not. And it's not just them. What Trump had done, for better or worse, is he'd called Mexico and he'd said, you don't let these guys across your border or we will no longer trade with you. And Mexico went, I guess we better not let them in. And so that's what was keeping them out. That's gone away now. So there's no reason they can't just let them all across the border, and that's what they're doing. Drop 2 says the next version of Microsoft Windows is likely to be Linux-based if rumors are to be believed. That ought to stuff everything up for your average computer user. You guys will be fine. I don't know whether Windows will go to Linux anytime soon. It's one of those things that for decades I've always said, okay, the moment I see Microsoft Linux on the shelf, I know we'll have one. Some of the stuff they're writing are trending that way, but the thing is, what really kills it for Microsoft is they have a whole bunch of products that are used in private businesses and in government that will only run on Windows servers, and the programming necessary to what's called port them, change it so that you can have recompile and make a different program on another computer that will then run on Linux is not trivial at all. So I don't know what they'll do. Marshall's saying inherently secure. That's what we're saying about the 10s because they don't route. Yes. Drop 2 says, evidently you can order Mexican food from Mexico while you are across the border in the U.S. I don't know anything about that. I just know the vast, gigantic numbers that are coming across that will be voters for the Democratic Party. If we have a voting system that is as insecure as the 2021 was, it would be very easy for some of those people to vote. And I'm pretty sure some of them will. Republicans, you have fracked up yet again, as always, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Marshall says Windows can't go to Linux as it would change all the APIs and applications programming interface. It's the way that your program maybe talks to the computer, to other programs. That the programs use, they do have a Linux subsystem that's already available on Win 10. Yes, I know that. I'm unclear why. I've used MOBA Xterm for years, and it's lighter weight, to be honest, and does the same thing. So, the other thing about the border agents, they have to be vaxxed by November or they'll be fired. The border agents. So New York State just got done firing a crap ton of nurses for no reason whatsoever, no rational reason. And people like Red Cortez, who wanted the end of the ICE Department, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, will get it, because a lot of these people are smart enough not to bother with this thing. Because let's be real, it's useless. It's useless. I can't think of a single thing that it actually protects you from. Not really. You can still get it. You can still transmit it. What's the point? What's the damn point? They all say, oh, well, you'll spend less time in the hospital. Really? I want to see the stats on that. Because I hear it all the time, but I see no actual data. I think that is propaganda that started someplace, and because all of the news outlets do nothing but parrot each other, they parroted that out. I want to see the data. I want to see the studies that say that if you take this vax, you will spend less time in the hospital than someone who didn't. I don't think they have any actual data. I can't find any. I've never been able to find any. I think it's a complete propaganda. All of this is just propaganda. Said it before, the only reason that this is an issue was because they wanted to be rid of Trump. And so by coming up with this, I mean, it was an issue in terms of China being horrific, but we probably would have ignored it if they didn't want Trump gone really bad, because they couldn't get him any other way. So they had to do it this way by essentially convincing enough people that he was personally responsible for every single death that occurred in the United States. Like he was out there, with, God, I know where it is here. Oh, well, can't find it. He was out there with a gun, putting it to, yeah, there it is. He was out there holding a gun to every single person who died's head. It was personally Donald Trump. That's what they convinced people. If it had not been an election year like that, I don't know that any of this would have come to a head. Let's see. Oh, boy. Hey, Johnny Arcade, nice to see you here. Commie takeover in full effect. Yes, there very much is. We are headed straight to tyranny if we're not there already. I think New York State is there. Let's see. Yes, don't use it. Suggest DuckDuckGo.com. Search Win10 Linux subsystem install. Yeah, you can find it. DuckDuckGo is the best place to go. Not only does Google track every last damn thing that you search, it tracks things like your locations. When it got really creepy for me one time, I was at work, and I realized that because at work I'm doing more IT-related searches, business searches, things like that. And so their suggested items tended to be in that direction, and it helped me find stuff. But when I went home, I never got that. They knew where I was. They knew that, oh, okay, he's here doing his business stuff. Now he's at home doing, things related to hobbies. So we don't show the same type of search results. That was creepy to me. Just creepy as all hell. And DuckDuckGo.com is a very good replacement for that. Let's see. Johnny Arcade System says, joke's on them. I'm not going to the hospital even if I'm dying. I don't even think you necessarily have to. I have a nephew that had it. I had to get tested just because I'm occasionally around him. He was sick for 2 or 3 days, and then he was fine. He had to stay home from work for like 14 days, but his health was perfectly fine. Again, he's younger, so, very low risk. Well, I shouldn't say younger. He's probably pushing 30 now, like my daughter. But, no problem for him. If I got it, I would, because of the fact that I live with somebody who has a pre-existing condition that could turn into pneumonia very easily with any kind of upper respiratory infection. If it happened to me, I wouldn't necessarily go to the hospital, but I would get the hell out and go to something like a motel. So that I don't have to worry about infecting anybody. But I've run through the stats. You can see how incredibly unlikely it is to have anything happen here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Johnny Arcade, rub some dirt in your virus and go to work the next day. Jeanette says, yes, exactly, Bill. Not a shred of evidence for anything they've said. Whenever I see this stuff on social media where they make any kind of claims, I always put the same thing down as a response. Proof, please. I want to see the peer-reviewed papers because I want to examine the data for myself. Crickets. They'll still say it, but they have no actual studies or data. I mean, how could you? How could you, really? This Delta variant that's only been out for, 2 or 3 months? You can't gather enough data in that short a period of time to come to any meaningful conclusion. You need a much, much larger sample to come to any kind of conclusion, and I don't think anybody's even thought about writing those papers yet. Those papers will come out years from now, when we have a larger data set to deal with. Drop 2 says the hypocritical police in Australia, particularly the states of Victoria and New South Wales, are using their unions to fight their state mandates on getting the jab, or the military will take their place. Well, at least their unions are doing something for them, I guess. Here, a whole bunch of nurses just got let go. I don't know if the Border Patrol has anything like a union or not, but if they do, they're not doing anything for them. That's for sure. Johnny Arcade says they bought their own propaganda. Yes, it's just confirmation bias. They want, and this is unfortunately not any kind of an exaggeration, they want the right dead. They literally want them dead. So if this virus, if they think, oh, well, it's only the right who's not taking the vaccine, that means they're going to die. It means they're going to be infecting us along the way, which isn't true. You can get it from any place. I have no idea where my nephew got it. He works in retail. God knows. He's only around tons and tons of people every day. But he's masked. He's vaxxed. He got it. And it didn't do much for him. I mean, I think he would have been about the same sick because he's a young guy. He's healthy. He's considering about my daughter's age, very healthy. He was almost exactly my daughter's age, my older daughter's age. Very healthy. He didn't need to worry too much about much of anything. I don't know how he felt about it, but I mean, if I'd been around, I'd be like, dude, don't worry. You're going to be perfectly fine. I have a little more to worry about if I got it because I got the diabetes, but I am not worried at all based on the stats that I give out every week. Yes, Drop of Truth. Original series Star Trek phaser. This is a very old one. It's not one I'd like to have. I'd really like to have one where the phaser one pops off, and but the people who make those types of things, it costs hundreds of dollars, and I can't cost justify this. This works for me when it works. Let's see. Where's the... Oh, yeah. It still doesn't have the stun sound, which goes like that when it's stunned. But yes, using DuckDuckGo.com for years. That's good. Drop it tooth. Everybody should. Johnny Arcade says the fact that they can't show you proof it's this or that variant is suspicious. Yes, they don't track it here in Lancaster County. I don't know how many of these new cases might be a variant. They just seem to be throwing them all together into one giant group, so I can't tell. I'd love to put up next to me what the variants look like, but they haven't given any statistics on that for months now. They did when it first came out. I saw them posted on Facebook, and never since then. Never since then. Wow, I'm going to have to take some WD-40 to this chair. It's starting to squeak. Let's see. Yeah, the whole deal is suspicious. Absolutely. As I say, I don't think that it would have been a huge deal like it is, that is totally eroding away our liberties and sending us straight to tyranny. I don't think it would have happened had they not wanted to be rid of Trump. He was the Antichrist, and they had to be rid of him, and that's that. So they used any possible excuse. It's just that simple. Drop of Truth says you can make a natural hydroxychloroquine version from grapefruit and lemon peel. Essentially, it's quinine. Take it with a zinc vitamin, tonic water, and bitter lemon also have quinine. I don't want to suggest anybody take anything on this show. This is not, you're not getting medical advice from me. Please don't. But I can tell you that my uncle had looked into this at some length. And he got the virus and did exactly what his research had told him to do. He was fine in a couple of days. And that guy's like 70 now, so much higher risk than even I am. Johnny Arcade says when Obama was in office, we had citizens here in Arizona go down to patrol the border. and they got in big trouble for it. Yes, he also took SB 10 Senate Bill 1070 from us after we voted for it. They want Arizona to be Mexico again. Yeah, you guys got tons of people pouring across the border, and now we face potentially the firing of Border Patrol agents who aren't vaxxed before November. Gonna get worse. Let's see. Drop 2 says the mRNA jab is the Delta variant. I don't know. I can't tell what's what. Only thing I know is what statistics I get off of my Lancaster County Health Department, and I'd like to know more. They have some very, very cool charts you can look at that clearly show things like our peak and then going down was clearly before the vaccine was on the market, any of them. And it really hasn't had any impact that way. So you can see those sorts of things on the graph. It's very nice. But what they don't do is break out things like different variants, like I would like to know, or for that matter, deaths that might have been side effects of taking the vaccine. I'd like to know that as well. How many of those are there? And they're simply not tracking them because it doesn't go along with the propaganda campaign. Yeah, could be a leaky vaccine. Leaky actually has some kind of a medical definition behind it that I don't know what is. 3D print one of these. Well, I first have to be able to justify a 3D printer. But that isn't what I'm going to print. I want to see if I can, or maybe get with an engineer or someone, and see if I can perfect the gyrojet. The gyrojet was either in a pistol or carbine form in the mid to late 1960s that did not fire a conventional bullet, but rather it was just a launching platform for a small rocket. The thing about it was the pistol, the launching platform for itself, didn't need, because it's pushing off a rocket, doesn't need to be able to stand up to high tolerances, with an explosive like you do a bullet. All the movement is being caused by the rocket shooting out of it. They used to test those things by putting them inside of toilet paper rolls, right? The problem with them was, at the time, they could not machine the rockets. How to describe this? In order to be very accurate with any kind of gun, you need the bullet to spin, right? In ordinary guns that use lead, the rifle, the barrel, the interior of the barrel is what's called rifled. It is sort of a spiral pattern from the from the back of the barrel to the front, and when the bullet goes through there, it spins, and that makes the bullet more accurate. The problem in 1960s was they could not machine. Now let me back up. To get the rockets to work, you didn't do the rifling inside of the barrel. The barrel was largely irrelevant. It was just a launching platform to aim through. What you did instead was the rocket itself, of course, was pushing, and it would have 4 or 6 holes in the bottom of, in the back end of the round, and those holes were at angles, so the propellant would spin it. The problem is they couldn't machine those holes well enough so that they would get consistent results. Sometimes they'd work, sometimes they wouldn't. I think with a 3D printer, you could certainly machine those now with 3D printers. You could print those. The problem is, okay, how can you 3D print, say, something that's like metal for a reasonable price? But I'd like to see that happen. If I'm 3D printing something, I'm going to 3D print myself a gyrojet and see if I can't, maybe work with an engineer and get that fixed. Because at least the whole launching platform itself would be 3D printable. Totally 3D printable. And it's possible the good chunks of the rocket itself might be 3D printable. I don't know, but I think you can now machine, because it's 3D printing, you can get those tolerances out of those little holes that you couldn't in the 1960s. Johnny Arcade says, I think we're going to have to meme this virus to death. Yeah, well, I probably ought to work on some. God knows I only have about 150 different marketing memes that I've created. They're not necessarily that great, but hey, my channel's logo is emblazoned on all of them, along with the URL for the channel. Marshall says, not really suspicious. You're talking about a very tiny variations in the spike proteins that can be detected, but only with very sophisticated equipment and very expensive. Yeah, and they're not necessarily doing that with everybody. I think probably President Biden gets it, but not Joe Average. Johnny says, wait till COVID grows ears and turns into the Mickey Mouse variant. Well, I'm just waiting for it to... for a gamma, or I'm sorry, an omega version to come out that they claim will kill you just by looking in its general direction. Microscopic thing over here. If you look here, you're dead. This is all going really, really south, and that's because what they want to do, I say it a million times, those in government are power-mad, sociopathic narcissists. We gave them, or the vast majority of people in this nation, gave them 100% of control of their bodies, and those guys are never going to give that back. Anybody who does that is a slave. Because it's just real simple, because if you don't own your own body, if somebody else owns your own body, you're a slave. They are willing slaves. I like when I'm on social media, baiting them sometimes. I will call them hypochondriac, cowardly, willing slaves. Because most of them are. Drop 2 says, then you'll get a Disney Plus variant. That's it, a Disney Plus. It'll kill you just by watching something on Disney Plus. There it is. Let's see, you could build a small rail gun with my electronics expertise. Yes, you can, but the problem is the power source. I want something that's going to really give a punch when it hits something. I take my cues from the Model 1911 pistol, which is in a .45 automatic Colt pistol for the most part. The way that was developed was they would shoot full-size bulls, cattle, in the skull until one bullet would kill them. That's what I'm looking for. I want something that if I've got it on me and somebody comes at me, I can fire one shot and in the head and they're dead. So the power becomes an issue to get enough of a magnetic field to really shove something out there. And again, you still have to figure out getting it to spin. It's complicated. Drop 2 says, spiral cut the tip of the projectile like a drill bit. Maybe, yeah. Johnny says, you want to be able to 3D print dinner. I think you'll get there eventually. They do have some medical grade 3D printers that can print living cells. I think it's something that's so expensive, that you're not going to see it on the market. But 3D printers are really rather inappropriately named. They're not exactly 3D printers. They are almost Star Trek's replicators. And at some point, when they are cheap enough, and when the raw materials to feed them are cheap enough, I think you will be able to to make dinner out of it. I think there are 2 or 3 technologies out there, and that's one of them, that, if brought to complete fruition, would change what it means to be human. I mean, imagine that you could give 3D printers capable of printing food to the starving billions of the world. Imagine you can 3D print almost anything, up to and including your house. And imagine it doesn't cost that much. It would literally change what it means to be human. And there are a couple of other technologies that go along with that. But 3D printing is one of the big ones. We've got some stuff in the background right now that, if brought to full fruition, can change what it means to be a human being. See you later, Jeanette. I see you're leaving there. Good night. Let me go back up and see what you're going to go mod? Yay. I have to give you guys a call, too. It's been weird. It's been weird. There's a whole bunch of... You don't see it, what's going on behind, but there's some stuff going on behind that made it difficult for me to do stuff. Marshall says, 90 minutes in, might want to review something. I got more things to talk about. Take care, Jeanette. Yes, she's a bank of capacitors. Yes, that would, no question, you could do stuff like that. But to me, it's a question of size. It's a question of stopping power. You know, I want something that I can put in a holster on my hip that isn't, you know, covered by firearms laws because it's not exactly a firearm, and that will kill somebody if I needed to. Let's see. Drop Truth says, okay, what if? Yes, looked promising this week. Became rather ridiculous. Again, I'll talk about that in a bit. Watcher should his ground against Ultron with all 6 Infinity Gems. My real question for that was, why didn't... I mean, the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, exists. And apparently when you go in there with Infinity Stones, they don't do a damn thing and they're worthless. So, you know, shove Ultron over into the dimension with the TVA. All of his Infinity Stones become useless. But I'll talk about that in a minute. I still have a couple of other things to talk about. Should I do this one or not? I got one. I've been kicking around whether I should do it or not. I think I'm going to. And some of you who are in the military may take offense at this, and I'm sorry if you do. For decades, I have heard people in the military say, if it gets to this point, then we will need to step in and take care of it so it doesn't go to tyranny. And every time we get to this point, it moves over here. And they say, when it gets to this point, we really mean it. And then it'll get to that point. And they say, okay, when it gets to this point, then we really mean it. Guys, we have a pack of domestic enemies sitting in Washington. They are all, no exceptions, not even your favorite, domestic enemies. They are putting us into tyranny. Are you actually planning to do anything, or are you just a blowhard? I just want to know. If you're not going to do anything, if you're just a blowhard, fine, quit saying you're going to do something. If you are going to do something, now's the frickin' time, man. We're headed to tyranny. We're in it to some extent already. It's not going to get better. We are never going back to the status quo because the people in government will never willingly give up the power that we gave them. If you're going to do anything right now, you know, I have a friend, a libertarian friend. I'm wearing a U.S. flag and a Gadsden flag, the one that has rattlesnake on it. It says, "Don't tread on me." I have a libertarian friend who makes those Gadsden flags, only instead of saying "don't tread on me" on the bottom and the snake being coiled, the snake is striking, and it says "time's up." Yeah, guys, time's up. If you're going to do something, now is the time. They are headed, taking us straight to tyranny. Drop Truth is saying the National Guard has been stationed throughout the USA recently. There's also UN vehicles in Chicago. Time to stand up. Don't be unarmed like Australia. I'm not sure I've seen the any UN vehicles in Chicago, but then again, I haven't been paying that much attention. My kids grow up in the Chicagoland area, so at various times I paid more attention there. Now it's just like, well, that's yet another hellhole that nobody should go live there, and you should get out if you do. But National Guard is kind of always around. I mean, there's an Air National Guard base right off of the Lincoln, Nebraska Municipal Airport, for example. It's a big one. I used to go there when I was in college. I used to be a courier, and I used to go there all the time. So, I mean, we've got those people around all the time. The state National Guards, because the National Guard belongs to states, individual states. Now, they can be federalized, and they are in times of war. They can be federalized and sent to war. But for the most part, they just operated in their own states, and they're pretty benign. I mean, I remember driving through an enormous flood at the confluence of the Big Sioux and Missouri rivers, where I used to live. Just a gigantic flood. And it was amazing to me because it took me a minute to get the scale. But they were laying down sandbags that were larger than the cargo helicopters they were using to pull them up. When I watched it, I'm like, okay, it's a sand. Wait, that's one of those big helicopters. These things are huge. I mean, they're usually doing stuff like that, benign things. So having them around isn't that unusual. With Chicago, best thing they could do would just be take away their victim disarmament laws, and the whole thing would solve itself. But until they do, and they won't, till they do, it's going to be a hellhole. Let me get off onto something else. Let me do some reviews. I got a bunch of them this week. I'm not going to go through and do really long reviews. Given the timing I've got going on here, it's 10:41 right now. I'll probably go longer than 2 hours because I've got a bunch of other stuff to say. But I'm not going to go on and do, long reviews and stuff like that. This will just be short stuff, mostly, because I've got so many of them to get through. I got 5 of them tonight, and one of them is Dune. So, I would have to say, if you're kind of going to sit with me this far, you have either watched Stargirl, Star Trek, Lower Decks, Foundation, Dune, and What If, and or you don't care if they're spoiled for you, but for safety's sake, we should issue a...
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a secret master of fandom, and that means that the fandom is strong with me. This isn't a boast. This is not a brag. This is unfortunately where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. The problem is that we are cursed. We simply can't see the new stuff for the old stuff that came behind it, and we realize that there's not that much that's actually that unique in the world. And in fact, this is the reason I mention it now, is because it's going to come into play directly with one of the things that I'm going to talk about. So, let's see. Oh, you're saying, sorry, not Chicago, they're in Maryland, just outside of Baltimore? I'll have to take a look at that. I'm a little bit more familiar with Chicago in general, having lived there for 10 years and my kids growing up there, so I'm a little bit more familiar with that. They have a... Here's Chicago, right? You can just judge it by this, right? Chicago has an entire police frequency that is the riot frequency. It's used for riots and riots only. So when I have like my app on here that I listen to police scanners on, it's always the riot frequency in Chicago. I mean, they actually have a frequency solely reserved for riots. Okay, so let me get down to what I'm going to review. Stargirl. I don't have a hell of a lot to say about Stargirl this time around. It was a relatively slow-paced episode. The interesting part of it is Eclipso, right? That is a supervillain that in the DC mythos wasn't all that horrifying. He was around since the Silver Age. So I know this source material. He was never all that horrifying. So for him to be turning into something that's really big and bad, I find interesting. But at the same time, I'm never quite sure because of this at this point what's real and what's not. And I'm sure that's the intention for the viewer. But what it looks like right now is we've got multiple, of the young superheroes walking away, or in one instance being arrested for beating the crap out of his father or stepfather, I don't remember which, because he was made to see Solomon Grundy. By the way, Solomon Grundy, Nebraska's a weird place for him if you know the source material. Solomon Grundy was a resident of swamps. That's basically where he lived, and I don't think we've got any real swamps in Nebraska. But it's an interesting supervillain anyway. They're making him out to be kind of like, Frankenstein's monster, and he was never that in the comics. One of the more fun things about it was he was a consistent enemy for the Golden Age Green Lantern. So anytime he would see Green Lantern, he would just go nuts, just absolutely nuts. He's got the same, he probably isn't as strong as the Hulk, but if you look at it, you can see he's a big, stupid monster, So about that, I don't have a hell of a lot to say. I do, God, you guys, you're really getting the weather wrong. I mean, I know in this episode they tried to hang a lantern on it by saying it's the 4th of July, but you would never feel it. It looks like it's the middle of autumn, you guys. There's places where there's massive amounts of trees with no leaves. Everybody's wearing jackets. Guys, 4th of July is hot. It should be like 100 degrees outside Fahrenheit. You guys, if you got to come out to Nebraska and shoot this thing so you can actually get the real weather, because it just bugs me now as a Nebraskan. I look at this and go, this is supposed to be the 4th of July? In what continent? It's not Nebraska. And of course they're kind of woke, so sometimes they like to hang a lantern on it by saying, it's climate change. It's nonsense. There's no climate change of any kind that anyone can measure in Nebraska. The weather here has been the same my entire life, and according to all records, the same back to roughly the Lewis and Clark expedition, which is the first time anybody actually kept records. The Plains Indians not only did not have a calendar, they did not have a written language, so they didn't keep any records. It's been like this since forever. There's no global warming or climate change involved in it. So let me make sure I haven't gotten something. Okay. So that's really the biggest thing that bugs me about it, is as a Nebraskan who, I don't remember I think it got up to, it's September now, so it's starting to cool down, but I think it got up to around 90 today. They've been predicting very high temperatures, a little off for this time of year, but not too much. If you live long enough, you see everything over and over. And even if they say the weather's weird, you go, well, yeah, but 15 years ago, the exact same thing happened. It's not that weird. So that's really the thing. I that just bugs me, because it's like, no, guys, no, nothing like Nebraska. No. Next on the list, let's see if I can hit it right. Star Trek Lower Decks. Something weird is happening with me in Star Trek Lower Decks. I'm not exactly warming to it, but I am to a degree. I think that's because of all the various Star Trek properties that have been in existence since, 2009. This one comes closest, and by close, if to being like real Star Trek, it's not there, because it's constantly doing weird crap that you would never see, and it's intentionally trying to be funny, but it's not. But if you look at all the other stuff, right? If you have a target here that the center of it, bullseye, is Star Trek. Right, and you threw Discovery at it, it totally missed the target. You threw Picard at it, totally missed the target. This one at least hits near the target now. It may be just that my standards, I think it is, my standards are getting so damned low that I'll take Lower Decks and say, all right, well, it's better than some of the other crap out there. I always say I have to give it to these people because they have references to other Star Trek that are correct. This time I've forgotten the alien's name, but the one that could, break itself into multiple pieces. That comes from a Star Trek the original series, Star Trek the animated series episode, written by David Gerrold of all people. The episode is Bem. And he's the character in there is also wearing the same clothes that this one was. That character also has no explicable way for why some of its body parts kind of float. So I saw that and I said, okay, all right, I get the reference. I like the reference. I always got to hand it to them. They get these references right. Somebody up there knows what they're doing with respect to that. So again, it's not exactly that I'm warming to the show. I still think it's not funny. And anybody who tries to tell me that it's canon, I'm going to be like, no. Not if you think Riker acts like that. Not if you think they always go around shooting things, because Boimler said it himself once, that, he didn't join Starfleet for the shooting the phasers. He joined Starfleet for the peaceful exploration. And that's what Starfleet is. He actually said that. I can get behind that. What I can't get behind is it's not that funny. It's not something that I'm going to watch twice. But when you pair it up against everything else that has Alex Kurtzman's name on it for Star Trek, it's a little better. Doesn't hit the bullseye, but at least it's on the edge of the target. All that other stuff is completely blown away. Drop True says the Boimler side story was almost clever. Yes, but the rest was dire. Yeah. You did predict Lower Decks would go naked for ratings. You were right. Yes. Oh, of course. And they're swearing too, although in their case they are bleeping them out. Guys, you don't have to do that. One of the reasons, I substitute, cursing and swear words for fictional ones. One of the reasons I did it, I started early, was because if you do it in class, everybody knows what the heck you meant by frack, but you can't get in trouble for it. But my other thing is, I told my children this when they're growing up. If you want to insult someone, anybody can use the 7 deadly words you can't say on television. And if you listen today, everybody does. Anybody can say that. Anybody can say that. What it takes brains to do is come up with an interesting insult. And I would say to my kids, you're both very smart. If you're going to insult someone, do it in a smart way. Don't do it in the same way everybody does it. So the swearing that they've got there, it again rubs me the wrong way, because they don't do that in Star Trek. It's well established that by the 23rd century even, that sort of language was just pretty much dying out in favor of language that didn't have anything that offensive, I don't think you need to have that on here, and bleeping it doesn't help. We all know what they're saying. Just don't do it. It's not that complicated, guys. It's just, you're writing this. If you suddenly, I have to put the F word in here, stop yourself and say, oh, wait a minute, that's not Star Trek. Backspace. What can we rewrite that's more interesting and a little smarter than that? Anybody can use the F word, and everybody does now. That's not an intelligent insult. But yes, Lower Decks, as I say, I'm not exactly warming to it, but I'm looking at it and going, well, oddly enough, there are times when it feels like real Star Trek. Out of all the crap that's got Alex Kurtzman's name on it so far, this one occasionally feels like real Star Trek. But it wasn't very funny, and while I did enjoy all of the callbacks and stuff, that they're references they're doing to other Star Trek, which there are unsurprisingly quite a lot of in this one, but just not funny. It's a comedy that isn't very funny. I didn't get any non-comedy moments. Non-comedy, as I've said before, a term coined by Rich Evans of Red Letter Media to indicate a joke that fell so flat that you are less happy after having heard the joke than before it. Didn't get any of that this time around, fortunately. It was just like, I don't know what even to say about it. I semi have a tiny bit of good feeling about it simply because it hits the target somewhere, not in the not in the center, but over off the edge somewhere. So that's pretty much what I have to say about Star Trek Lower Decks. It's okay at times. Not all the time. I'm going to jump over What If and go to Foundation instead. Okay, Foundation. I'm nervous. It's the curse of the secret master of fandom kicking in. I'm very nervous. I'm extremely familiar with the source material. The source material started out because it was in the era of the pulp science fiction magazines, and they didn't print whole novels in there. Sometimes they had novellas, which were kind of long, short stories, but obviously they're not publishing an entire novel. So the way that the Foundation series started out was Isaac Asimov writing short stories or novellas, I'm not sure which, and selling them to one of these pulp magazines. And only afterwards were they then collected and put into a book. So the first book in the Foundation series is collected kind of short story / novellas. They don't, while they have a through line that is common through the narrative, all the characters change because time periods go up. You start out with Harry Seldon getting taken, again, if you haven't seen it, spoiler, start out with Harry Seldon leaving Trantor with Galdornik, and then you jump forward in time to where there are other characters that you'll deal with for the next chunk, and then you jump forward in time even more, and like that. And then when you get into some of the more later novels, well, those are actually novels. Those are novels that he wrote as novels and has a through line, an actual literary through line in all of them. And there are a lot of them now. It used to be just the Foundation trilogy for years and years, but then somebody said, hey, Ike, I think you could make some more of those and make a lot more money. And so Ike did. Ike is Isaac Asimov. So he also had a second series. He has this Foundation series now that's a number of books. He also had another series, the Robot series. This is where you will hear he came up with the 3 laws of robotics. And he didn't do that he did it mostly just for logic problems, right? Originally, there was a robot detective working with a human detective, and it would be a story about how was one or more of the 3 laws of robotics come in conflict with each other and things like that. It was logic problems. Then, towards the end of his life, he connected those two because the Foundation series started like 12,000 years in the future. I mean, Earth isn't even a memory. These guys don't even know where the human race came from, right? And then there was the Robot series. And the Robot series and the Foundation series, he then linked together in one or two of the novels. So, spoiler. Big spoiler. Big spoiler on this one. What he did in one of the later novels was have one of the primary robots that he always had in the early robot books have been around for like 12,000 years, kind of looking after humanity, and discovers that there is a way that they can have a galactic hive mind. And it was up to one of the people from the Foundation to decide whether having a hive mind would be a good thing or not. Asimov was into this stuff. So the first book that he wrote about that, the characters said, yes, we do want the hive mind. Okay. Well, come to modern day. People who make our entertainment are the communists. They think a hive mind would be a good thing. So what do we have right from the beginning in Foundation that we never saw in that series until Asimov linked them? A robot. Oh, I am so nervous that they're going to bring these two things together early. And they're going to wind up by the end of the series with everyone having a hive mind, because that's what the people who make our entertainment want. Because the show bears only tangential at best relationship to the books. I get where you'd have a problem, saying, okay, we're going to take this novella and turn it into an episode or two and then throw all those characters away and start them. I get where you have a problem with that. But it really has very little to do with it. There's, this whole voyage that they have on the ship never happens in any of the books. They're set to leave Trantor. Story ends. Story picks up again. I don't know how many years later. It's just totally jumped over, and everybody, Galdornik and Selden are just dead, right? Long dead. Here, not only has that happened, but the first episode, not only do we have a robot, where it should not be in this part of the timeline. Not only do we have a robot there, what was I going to say? I forgot now. I lost my train of thought because I don't have any written notes. It'll come back to me. Anyway, I'm afraid that's where we're going to go. And now they've taken Galdornik and shoved her into an escape pod and put her out into space for reasons that I don't really understand. Hopefully it'll become clear in later episodes. I've watched the first two. I haven't checked to see if there's others dropped. But Galdornik was dead. And, for the overwhelming majority of the Foundation books. It just appeared in the first part of the first one. Yet we have now heard her voiceover with characters that come later in the books, much later. The beginning of the first episode, they were referencing characters and had characters in front of you that are major players in later parts of the book. But Galdornik is nowhere there. So if these are they squishing it together so that Galdornik is still alive when these other players were involved, and we're just going to shove the whole thing back instead of saying, okay, we're going to take kind of a snapshot over a long period of time? Is that what's happening here? Or are they throwing her out in space to be picked up later so that she can have interactions with these characters that don't show up until much later in the books? The curse is bothering me. Oh, the curse. I hope I'm wrong, but it's got the hairs on the back of my neck up. Dropper2 says, please explain the gender swapping in Foundation. It's just usual woke stuff. I really don't mind that so much. Galdornik was never a big character, really. It was an expository character. It was a character who went to the main character, and then we got the expository stuff that we as a reader needed to know. But it was never a big player. I don't really have a problem with it being female. I have more of a problem with inserting all of this stuff that never occurred in the books, and that robot that makes me very nervous, and shoving Galdornik out into space, which makes me very nervous, because what are they going to do with the rest of it? It bears a resemblance to Foundation books in as much as you have psychohistory, you have some of the big events so far, but it's adding in all kinds of stuff that Asimov never, ever imagined writing. Drop 2 says, very similar to the Butlerian Jihad in the Dune books, particularly the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson books, not the original 6, by Frank Herbert. I tell you, I have never been able to get through the Dune books. I'll get to that in a second because I'm going to do Dune as well. Marshall says, still waiting for our Giscard. Yes, maybe Gal is a robot designed by our... Oh, please, no. Please. Please don't bring in the robots. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, I am really scared they're going to do that. Oh, I don't want the damn curse to be true, but it just looks like it is to me. Beyond that, this is a very beautifully shot, great special effects. I think they got Trantor a little wrong, but I understand why they did some of what they did. Trantor is completely covered. In the book, Galdornik wanted to go and see the sky, which no one ever does. Took an elevator up and could walk around on a surface that was bajillions of stories high. And the only real land belonged to the emperor, and that was a very strange occurrence to have this land out in what was otherwise a completely covered planet. I get where it's probably a little difficult to say, oh, look at that planet, it's covered in a big giant shell of metal. So I understand what they're doing there, but again, you just get to these things that don't have a hell of a lot in common with the books. The first episode did more than the second. Maybe Drop 2 says, if they do merge Foundation and iRobot, then Galdornik will become the hive mind precursor. Yeah, I mean, very well could be. And please don't. Just leave the robots out. I don't want that hive mind thing coming around ever, frankly, because I know how you guys in Hollywood are all communists, and you would eat that up. The idea that you could turn people into insects, who do the bidding of their masters and fall into a particular niche. I don't like the entire idea of a hive mind. I get that Heinlein was not Heinlein, but Asimov was kind of into it, but that was way later. I'm around 1,000 years after they left Trantor. Marshall says, it's the only way in series that you can see having a consistent observer character throughout the whole interregnum, seeing that it's 1,000 years long and all. Yeah? I understand that. It's just that I'm really worried about what that represents. The only robot we ever saw in the in the Foundation books, what was it? R. Daniel Olival? That's the only one we ever saw, and that was at the very end of those Foundation books. Like the last two. They went searching for Earth. When they got there, it was a thing of radioactive hellhole. But R. Daniel Olival was, I think it was him. Correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've read him. But he was hiding out on the moon or something. But it's a whole other thing when you're going to introduce the 3 laws, and then in the case of what they did at the end of that, the 0th law. So it's a whole other thing. Just let Foundation be what it is, without having to resort to going way to the end of the series to pull this out of your butt. You think it was Giscard? Okay, Daniel was destroyed, I think. I don't remember. It's been a while since so you might be right. I just don't remember for certain. That, this is my basic thing about it. It really is a beautiful show, in terms of how it's shot. There's one weird thing scientifically that doesn't make sense, which was they're not taking a faster than light ship on a a trip that must use faster than light? I mean, if you're going from roughly the center of the galaxy, which is where Trantor is, to somewhere out on one of the edges, you're going to need some kind of hyperdrive, but they said we can't use it. No, you got to have that, or else you're not going to get there in anybody's lifetime. So there's that, the little things about the science, but for the most part, it's internally consistent. It makes sense. All of this stuff with the actual emperor, never in the book. None of it in the book. The emperor met one time with Harry Seldon to make sure that he could get rid of him. And that was about it. We didn't have all this other stuff. We didn't have the giant space elevator drop onto Trantor. That never happened. All of that stuff was just invented for this. Same thing with, they're traveling from Trantor to, name of the planet escapes, Terminus. Wasn't in there. What sort of worries me about that more than anything is nobody reads anymore. Possibly with the exception of my viewers. A lot of people, as I've said, they leave high school and can't read. They're never going to read the books. So, they're just going to watch this and they're going to think that's what it's about, and it's not. It's really very different. Looking over here, Marshall says, damn, now I have to read it again. I look forward to that. Actually, I read the first 3 Foundation books about 6 weeks ago. Get it on audiobook format. Yeah, they could do that too. You could certainly do that too. I don't know how many people do that. I mean, they make money on it, so they must. So let me slip on, after having said Foundation is good, even though it doesn't bear much resemblance to the books, to a film that does bear a strong resemblance to the first part of the first book. Here's the problem. Audiences, I like it, don't get me wrong. I think it's really beautifully lit and beautifully photographed, or probably green screen. Pieces of it should and do remind me of shots from like Lawrence of Arabia. The difference is I know for a fact that Lawrence of Arabia was actually shot out in the friggin' desert. So it's a different type of shooting if they're doing, and I assume they are, lots of CGI. But this does bear, again, full disclosure, I've never actually been able to get through all of the, I think I got through the first Dune novel. It's not that I didn't like it, it's just that for me, it's a little slow. Now we have a third to half of one book up here. And audiences today have been trained to expect science fiction to be lots of, bing bang action, pew pew, and things like that. They've been conditioned to expect that. This film is much slower paced. I'm okay with it being slower paced because I look at, what's going on and go, wow, that's really nicely shot. Glad I got the screener. Can't wait to get a digital copy because the screener isn't. But I look at it and go, wow, that's really nicely shot. That's a lot of cool things to see. But there's not much action in it. There is some, but I think I timed it. The first real action doesn't come until like almost an hour into the film. You're asking viewers who are used to Marvel movies to sit slowly through something. I don't think it's going to work. I think it is a good adaptation, and I don't think it comes out in the U.S. until later, so I'm not going to talk very much specifically about it. That would spoil it for most of my viewers. It is a good adaptation of something that I was never sure was even filmable. So it's a good adaptation that way, but it's not, action set piece every 10 minutes. I like that. But I think they're going to have a real problem with general audiences. They're going to come into this thinking there's going to be some kind of bing, bang, pew, pew action. and they're going to end up sitting watching a lot of sand for a lot of time. And I don't know for sure how it's going to go, but I don't think this film is going to do that well at the box office because of that. It's a good film. It's a good film. It's beautifully shot. It's a lot of fun to look at if you're, like me and you're looking at the filmmaking side of it. But I think the average viewer is going to walk in there and go, "Where's the pew pew?" We will see when it gets released. We'll see. Marshall says, "You're right, Danielle." Okay, cool. You have the Foundation Canon on your phone. So do I. All of them. Yeah, I only read the first 3 a few weeks ago, but yeah, I have them all on my phone too. Drop 2 says, "Trantor to Terminus is 50,000 light years, and they'll get there in 878 days. They must have faster than light speed." Yeah, except they said they couldn't get one. It was explicitly said in like the first or second episode that they couldn't get one. So these guys, trust Asimov. Trust Isaac Asimov. The man was a chemical engineer or something. He was a real scientist. He was incredibly prolific, not just with science fiction, but also with purely fact-based stuff. There's a book, Asimov's Guide to Science, that somewhere I've got. It's a book like this thick, hardback book like that. And Gene Roddenberry said that it always sat on his desktop when he was making Star Trek because he could use it as a reference, Asimov was good at taking some complex scientific stuff and turning it into something that a reasonably intelligent reader could understand. And so that's why Roddenberry had the thing around. So he was really prolific that way. Just trust Asimov, guys. Just trust what he's done here. You don't have to insert any scientific weirdness or technobabble. Just trust Asimov. He knew what he was doing. Drop 2 says Villeneuve wants to make a Dune trilogy. Yeah, I know. I just don't know how it's going to fly at the box office. Our audiences are not used to slow films. They're just not used to it at all. We'll see what happens. Drop 2 says, "I enjoyed the philosophical and theological implications of the relationship between Paul and the worms/spice." Yes, again, this is a pretty good adaptation from what I've read. Again, full disclosure, haven't been able to slog through it all. Hey, I've never been able to slog through Atlas Shrugged either. I from what I've looked at, because I've been curious, so there are lots and lots of videos on YouTube that'll give you backstory for this, that, and the other thing. So I know the general plot. And I am apparently a tiny minority of people who actually like the Sci-Fi Channel adaptation both of Dune and of Children of Dune. Apparently, I'm the only guy who kind of likes those. Everybody I know would prefer the other film, which I think really sucks. When you have to spend half your film monologuing in your head about everything so that the audience knows what this, that, or the other thing is, I think you've blown it. Show, don't tell, if you can. But I actually like the Sci-Fi Channel adaptations. And they're very different from this also. Again, I just don't know how this is going to do in theaters. I'm not sure how this is going to do. We'll see. Let's see. Marshall says, "Never try to correct Asimov or Clarke's science. It's a sucker bet." Absolutely. Drop 2 says, "Isaac Asimov was an American writer and professor of biochemistry." That's what it was at Boston University. Yeah. Drop 2 says, "Ayn Rand is an awful philosopher and an insipid writer." I am not a Randite as a libertarian. Yeah, I've read some stuff. It's a little plodding. Again, I've never been able to slog through Atlas Shrugged. I just can't. It doesn't hold my interest for any length of time. And I'm not supposed to have done that. As a libertarian, it's like supposed to be required reading. Sorry, guys, I just couldn't do it. Marshall says, Deb also likes those, you're talking about the sci-fi ones, over the 1984 film. Well, who wouldn't like anything over the 1984 film? That was awful. I mean, I know people who like it, and I'm like, why? To me, the biggest thing about that film is all the monologuing that's going on inside people's heads constantly. Isn't there some other way that you can, get things across without constantly monologuing and having the internal dialogue of somebody coming out? It's just so weird. Marcia says, drop pity that she called it so accurately. Yeah. Did she really, Marshall, or was it just interpreted that way? Now, again, I haven't slogged through that book. I have slogged through the 2 movies. And the second one of the 2 sucks. First one's okay. The second one, no. First one's all right. Those I could sit through. But the second one pretty much sucks. Yeah, look around. She's dead. Things are pretty much down the path she laid out. Yeah, I mean, she was very much anti-communist and like that. So, again, I don't actually know that much about Ayn Rand, except that as a libertarian, I'm supposed to know all about her. I've seen some good interviews with her on YouTube that are educational. But anyway, that's my take on Dune. I think it is a very pretty film. It is a good adaptation as far as I can tell from what I know of the books. But it's slow. It's way slower than audiences have been trained to expect. And I think that's going to be a big problem for it. The pace is appropriate for the book, don't get me wrong. It's just that as a film, it's really slow for the average audience member. The movies are awful. You mean for Atlas Shrugged? Well, I don't think they're great. I could sit through the first one. The second one, I'm just going, wait a minute. This is nothing but characters speaking expository dialogue. The whole film is just expository dialogue, and then the end just kind of happens. Yeah. All right, on to the next one, which is down here-ish. What if? From the Genocidal Mouse. Yeah. Here we go again. We've got, clearly Kevin Feige has something in mind. He's gone and made all of these characters from alternate universes, and now Ultron can crash into any alternate universe that he wants, and he's aware of the Watcher, and the Watcher has now decided to violate his oath. Well, we've already seen in trailers and clips what's going to happen. All of these characters that we've already seen are going to join up and become the Avengers. If you remember looking at those trailers, you had Captain Carter, you had Star-Lord as King T'Challa, all of those characters are now all together. I think that what's going to happen is the Watcher is going to pull them all together for some kind of Avengers team to take on Ultron. But for me, the biggest problem is this. It's animation. Now, I don't have any problems with animation, right? I've said a million times that I don't consider Star Trek the Animated Series canon because it doesn't fit with the rest of it. You certainly can't consider Star Trek Lower Decks canon. It doesn't fit with anything. But this one, animation makes what they've done in other movies, it takes it, and when they do it in animation, it looks too easy. They did really good, especially in Endgame, with those huge battles, and making it look really terrible with really high stakes, right? Incredibly high stakes in the case of Thanos. So we take this and turn it into animation, and it starts to feel like some of the other animated Marvel series that have been out there. I mean, there's been 2 animated Avengers. There's at least one animated within the last 10 to 15 years. There's an animated Spider-Man in the last 20, not including the film. I think there was a Hulk one, Agents of Smash, that he was part of. So it starts to look like all of these others. The animation is more realistic. It's trying to be more realistic, but the action and stuff just starts to feel like these other animated films. It's fine for this to be in canon. I don't have any problem with that. This is purely a question of aesthetics. The stories are, but it's a question of the aesthetics. It starts to look like other animated series that have already been done. And in that respect, I don't find it that interesting. When they get into these big fights, Ultron against the Watcher. And to me, the interesting parts are when they're like smashing through different, universes and stuff like that. Those are fun moments for me. But the big fights feel like big fights that I've seen before a million times in animation. So it just doesn't do it for me. We'll wait and see what the ultimate story is. I think the ultimate story is get all these people from all these universes together in one place so they can fight Ultron. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But mostly it's just after you've started seeing bashing around, smash, pew pew in animation, it just starts to look like any other animated series that Marvel's done. Let's see. Drop 2 says the world today is not communist socialist, it's fascist like Roman Empire. Roman Empire did it better. I think the United States could be considered an empire because we have so many bases and so many places and stuff like that. We don't do it right. The ancient Romans, and you know this drop of truth by virtue of the crucifixion of Jesus. The Romans didn't generally screw around with home rule. They were like, okay, you just give us our money. You guys can do whatever you want. You want to crucify Christ instead of the thief over here? Fine, whatever. Whatever. Do your own thing. We don't care. Just make sure we get the money. And I think if the United States did more of that, less world building and nation building, and just saying, okay, we're going to be here, make sure we got our money, and we'll leave you the hell alone. The Alt Avengers, Marshall says, yes. Funny I make the distinction. Rand was all about collectivism being bad. Yes, fascism is a collectivist philosophy. Yes, derived from Marxist socialism. I think that's true. Drop of Truth is saying the MCU Captain Marvel, yes, got her powers from the Power Stone, so why couldn't Ultron just deactivate her powers since he controlled that Infinity Gem? If Ultron's got them all, and he can crash into different realities, I can't see any reason he couldn't just kill her outright. Or use the Space Stone to send her to the middle of some sun somewhere. It's going to take her to get a while to get out of. It's Ultron with all the Infinity Stones. He can do anything he wants. Drop 2 says fascism has been around throughout history. It's often known as a monarchy. Well, read Gentile's and Mussolini's books. That was the origin of modern fascism. We can get into different stuff like that. For me, the ultimate thing is right now we're kind of screwed because of our government. Gonna need to starve them out, and I need some of you people in the military who said you would fight actually do it. Anyway, that's kind of my take on What If. That's my take on What If. It's okay. There's nothing horrible about it, I don't think. It's just that for me, after a while, the animation starts to look like every other thing they've animated before in other series. So let us get on to the big one. The Babylon 5 reboot. The Babylon Project was our last best hope for good science fiction. I'm pretty sure it's going to fail. But in the years that the never-ending virus came, it became something greater. Our last best hope for non-woke science fiction. The year is 2021, and the place is Babylon 5. And who the hell am I kidding? It's going to be woke. I have it on reasonably good authority that J. Michael Straczynski, or JMS, the guy that this is his whole brainchild and always has been, has kind of gone woke. I think we can expect lots of LGBTQ, and he said also that he's going to, try to do parallels to modern politics, which, if you're woke, just means that anybody who isn't woke is evil. We see it everywhere. This is going on the CW, guys, the same one that runs Batwoman. If JMS has gone woke, it's going to suck. It's going to be the same old crap we're used to watching elsewhere. And JMS is a hell of a lot older than he was. I mean, Marshall, I don't know what I can say about this. Yeah, okay. Marshall, but Marshall was associated with that show, and knew some of the people involved. You still haven't gotten me a good date with Claudia Christian, for Christ's sake. Anyway, if he's also a hell of a lot older. When he was making Babylon 5 in the 90s, it nearly killed him. I'm told that it aged him a good 20 years just doing the show, that his wife threatened to leave him if he wouldn't take time off after the show wrapped. And now it's, 93, 2003, 2013. It's almost 30 years later. Can a man who has got to be approaching 70, and I don't know, can he really do that schedule? Because the reason he did it was because he did not tell anybody. As I always say to people who've never watched Babylon 5, the first rule to Babylon 5 is you don't spoil Babylon 5. And he did that. He did not tell anybody. He didn't tell actors about their backstory. He didn't tell what their story arc was going to be going forward. He didn't say what the ends were going to be. Nobody knew that but him. And he wrote a ton of scripts because of that. Just a ton of them. Is he up to that now? Can you really do that again at that age? At my age, I'd be dead. At 56, if you tried to put that workload on me, I'd be dead. I would just fall apart. My sciatic nerve would give out one day, and I'd be sitting in bed trying to write scripts on my word processor on my lap without killing myself in pain. So I have to go. Can he do that again? Let's see. Marshall says, here's where you can't say shit, you promised. Yeah, I understand that. What about Star Wars Visions? It's aimed at 12-year-olds, dumb 12-year-olds. I watched first part of one episode. It's nothing wrong with that. It's just that I'm not much into anime. I get, one of my kids is hugely into anime. Totally influenced everything she does, including what she does for a living now. She works in the video game industry. Loves anime. But I'm not a big lover of anime. To me, the pacing feels weird, and so I watched one, and I went, "Oh, okay. Well, this is not something I'm going to be watching just simply because I know I wouldn't enjoy it because it's anime, really." Marshall said CW because Warner's owns them. Yes, but it's still the CW where the Batwoman lives and other stuff that's total woke garbage. Drop2 says you still haven't finished Babylon 5's first season and the original film. It's slow, almost ponderous, but at least it's clever. It's a slow burn. The first season is kind of setting up the characters and the world. After that, it starts to take off. Particularly in the latter two seasons or so, it really takes off. The first one is slower, but it's a slow burn so that you've got the world built completely, so that when other things happen within the context of that world, it all makes sense. But like Marshall says, get through it midway through season 2, it'll be addictive. Yes, it like I say, slow burn to set the stage, and then it starts to really go. Let's see. Marshall says he's got some damn good writers at studio. JMS does. Okay, but I think he'll have to tell somebody what this is. And he said that he's not going to do the same plot, and how could you? You know, the big reveal is now everybody who wants to know either has seen it or has looked it up. You can't do that big reveal again. He's got to do some totally different story. And of course, you can't do sequels because several of the actors have passed away and things like that. Marshall is saying the biggest complaint everyone had about JMS was TMFE, usually shouted loudly, too much effing exposition. Yeah, in the first season or so, I think it tends to get less. But again, it's kind of a slow burn. But my biggest problem here is, what if he's gone woke? Then it will suck. Just plain suck. And can he really do that kind of work anymore? At his age, can he really do the work that's necessary to do what he did with the original Babylon 5, which is not tell anybody nothing, which means he has to write it. You know, tons and tons of script. If you watch the last, everything, even hell, right from the beginning, look for his name as written by. And there's some that's written by others in the first season, but after that, Jesus, he almost wrote whole seasons. I think he did write at least like season 3. Wrote it himself, almost. So I wonder about that. I wonder about, what if he's gone woke? And the other thing is, really, I've said it before, I want to see new stuff. Is this something we actually needed? No. The original stands on its own without anything else. Totally stands on its own. It needs nothing further. It's like doing a sequel to Casablanca. You have a masterpiece, and it was heavily influential. Before it is that whole show is filled with arcs. And before he did that, almost no science fiction had arcs. After that, every science fiction has arcs. It was very, very impactful. But it stands alone. You don't need to add to it. You don't need to reboot it. It's fine the way it is. Come up with a totally different idea that is not Babylon 5 related, because I'm sure JMS could do that. We didn't need this. We really didn't. The original stands on its own just fine. Marcel says, actually, Joe wrote one of several plots he had in mind for all sorts of contingencies, like a major character having to leave after season 1 due to health problems. Yes, don't. First rule of Babylon 5, don't spoil Babylon 5. We got somebody who hasn't read it. Watch it here. Marshall says there's about 20 potential storylines from 1993, all with different twists and turns. Well, you could make those. But again, why? Babylon 5 is great on its own. It is his masterpiece. It is his opus magnum. It was incredibly influential on the science fiction that followed it. Why do we need it? It was perfect. Don't screw with it. It's like going to a painting by Van Gogh and saying, oh, let's remake this painting. No. Van Gogh was fine. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. Go off and do something different. Totally different. We don't need to do this. I get it. The whole point is the brand name recognition. I get it. But it stood by itself alone. We don't need more of it. It is a masterpiece all by itself. Drop 2 says, there's only one book I'd like to see made into a film, James Blish's Black Easter, Day After Judgment. I've never actually read that. I'll have to go and find it. I know it's in my ebook library. Drop 2 says, I know the history of Babylon 5 and the replacement of the actors. Okay. Yeah. It impacted the end of the show. JMS has said it didn't, but it clearly did. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, Marshall, but you got to know what I'm talking about. Babylon 4. I am dead certain from the way that it was written that it was supposed to be that actor who left at the end of season 1, at the end of season 5, doing that other thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, JMS has said, no, it was always going to be like it is. And I'm looking at it and go, no, there's no reason for certain things to happen in one of those shows if it wasn't intended to be the end of the series. So, Marshall says, in my opinion, he wants to do it with newer techniques, newer tech effects, bigger, better, faster, stronger. Might be a mistake. Then again, he's been known to pull off miracles. I think the guy's brilliant. I guess, it's like Star Trek, the original series, that nobody will watch because the tech is too dated. And now we're 25, 30 years out from Babylon 5, and the tech appears dated because it was, at the time. And the special effects that went into that, so. Marcia says, the ending was completely different from the original. I have the original season 5, episode 24 outline. I'm sure I know what the end was supposed to be, had they not lost that actor. I'm certain of it. And his claims to the contrary, dude, the clues are all there. They're all there. So we shall see about the Babylon 5 reboot. I do not see the necessity. It was a masterpiece on its own. When you reboot like this, you're either brilliant enough to pull it off a second time, have lightning strike a second time, or you end up tainting the original with a poor, reboot. So, Marshall says, nope. Are you talking to me about what I think the ending should be? Because I don't want to talk about it because unless it involves fishing, I don't. Well, didn't really think about fishing exactly. We can talk offline about it, but I don't want to spoil anything for Drop of Truth and some other people who might catch me later that have never watched the show. So, again, the first rule of Babylon 5 is that you do not spoil Babylon 5. If you spoil Babylon 5, it kills it for you. It just kills it for you. So, let me go on. It's coming up on 3 hours, and my back's okay. If I can find my mouse, there it is. Let me go to what's in the darkroom this week. Put up a few things. Firstly, Superman episode 13, Destruction, Inc. There's a link to that in my description box below. It has been upscaled to 1440p and 48 frames per second. It is not an incredibly beautiful print, but it's not bad. Now, I said earlier on, that at some point you were going to get a point where you say, I think this isn't as good as the early ones. Watch it and see what you think. I'm not going to go on and talk about everything in the darkroom because I didn't have time to write up notes to do what I usually do. But, yeah, we're all experienced pros at saying truths without revealing plots, Marshall says. Yes. Anyway, you can watch it. The general plot is it's World War II. Obviously, it's during World War II. There is a munitions plant in Metropolis, and Superman has to make sure that saboteurs are not being a problem. And something very interesting happens at the end. I won't spoil it, but when you get to the end and what Lois does, ask yourself, if she can do that with that, why can't she do it normally? You'll see what I mean if you watch it to the end. You'll see what I mean. It's disguise related. You'll see what it means. Also, in the darkroom, I have Stephen Colbert's vomit-inducing The Vaccine, upscaled to 4K and 60 frames per second. Link below. If you've not seen it, watch it once and never again. I will have you know that to get that thing upscaled, I had to pull a clip out of the show, and then I had to upscale it, and then I had to upscale, reinterpolate the frame rate. I actually had to watch this thing repeatedly. It's terrible. You will just go, I can't believe this is real. I no idea what they're going for in this stupid, it is the most cringeworthy thing. I dare say, and I put it in my description for that video, I dare say that he may finally have come up with something that tops the Star Wars Holiday Special in terms of cringe. At least this one piece. How Star Wars Holiday Special is cringe all the way through. But this thing, the vaccine, oh, God, you just feel embarrassed for everybody involved. Let's see. Can you please downscale this to glorious 2p and mute the volume? That would make it better. Oh, God, it's terrible. It is really bad. Drobbin says, do it yourself with Handbrake. Yes, you can do it. That's actually how I get the clips. I pull the clips out with Handbrake. Then I run it through this AI thing to get it to, upscale, and then another program to interpolate the frame rates. Like I say, I had to watch this thing more than once. It's pretty in 4K. It's just bad. It is so cringe. I have to wonder if the woke actually think that's any good. Because it's just awful. It is one of the worst things I've ever seen put to screen. It's like Plan 9 from outer space. It looks like Colbert and the people at CBS were serious about this. They're trying to do something good, and it's awful. It's just terrible. Go watch it once and never again. However, because I upscaled it, a guy named Kearnu Phoenix put it together with some of Clockwork Orange. And he's got a video called, he took mine and took a Blu-ray rip off of the Clockwork Orange and put them sort of together, and it's hysterical. It's the best thing I've ever seen. It is the vaccine aversion therapy. I have a link to that in my description box as well. Go watch it. This is just a hysterical little video. And interestingly enough, he had it on Twitter as well, and he tagged me and said, hey, thanks for doing this. I could then stick a Blu-ray version in there and have the everything match up in terms of how it looks. And some woke idiot commented right after this, oh my God, are you serious with this? And I'm like, yes, the damn thing's hysterical because it's making fun of this completely ridiculous thing that Stephen Colbert did. So go take a look at that. It's not on my channel. Just go look. It's hysterical. For me, and the other thing that's in my that's in the dark room, I have a history with this. But for me, the whole damn thing was just nearly vomit-inducing. So for that, I'm going to give you 1 minute of the best vomiting scene ever put to film. I love that scene. That's damn near what that thing did to me. And I upscaled that 4K, 48 frames per second. Go take a look at it. It's actually very pretty, in terms of how it turned out. I got copyrighted audio and video. My stream may be cut if I drop off here. Temporarily blocked. Let me know if I'm suddenly gone. Doesn't look like I'm gone, but I kind of expected that. I got a copyright claim on it when I was uploading it. But it's 4K, and it looks very pretty. And I have to tell the story behind this. Way back when... Yeah, God, that mix was hilarious. Yeah, I loved that thing. Way back when, I was consulting, and I worked for a movie theater. It was brand new, setting all kinds of equipment up. This was back when running ads, with a computer on the screen, prior to the film and stuff, was a little unusual, right? Not trailers, but you walk into the theater and there's an ad on the the screen. So I was working on setting stuff like that up. I had to, go up about 40 feet in the air, and do some stuff on the ceiling one time. But I was doing it at the same time that Team America World Police was in the theaters. And the first time I saw that scene, I just laughed my ass off. And in theaters like that, there's a floor that's nowadays it's just basically a big room with digital cameras pointing out, digital projectors going at various different places in the room. So whenever I was working up there, and I knew that scene was coming up, I would drop what I was doing and walk over to the window where the projector was and just watch that puking scene. I love that thing. I think it's hysterical. And Stephen Colbert, that's what you made me want to do with your stupid vaccine video. Oh, God, is that horrible. Anyway, go over and watch the other one on the other guy's channel. That's very, very funny. It's really hysterical, and it's not the same as the puking. But if you want to look at a really pretty example of something that upscaled well, it is a great upscale. Everything's very detailed, and it looks very clean when people are moving. So go take a look at that one too. Anyhow, it has now been damn near 3 hours, so I think that is about all that I have to say about that. I would certainly love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, your questions, and your nasty remarks, and I'll do my best to respond to you. And of course, do like, sub, hit the notification bell, share me on social media, because that's how I grow. So thanks for watching this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, and I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.